Angela Brooks stepped off the moving walkway with calm confidence. She had flown this route many times before, and she knew exactly what to expect. The airport buzzed around her, people hurrying in every direction, announcements echoing overhead in polite, clipped voices. She paused for a moment in the gate area to scan the electronic board. Flight 472 to Detroit was on time, boarding at gate C12 in just 10 minutes. She adjusted the strap of her leather handbag, lifted her chin, and smiled at herself in the small mirror above an information desk. Today felt like any other day for Angela, the chief executive of a growing technology company. She had meetings in Detroit with potential investors, and she counted this familiar flight as a vital first step toward securing her next round of funding. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email, but she ignored it until she had settled into her seat. Instead, she approached the airline desk to confirm her seat assignment. The attendant, a young woman with kind eyes and a name badge that read Mia, greeted her by name. Angela offered her frequent flyer card and confirmation number, and Mia scanned the screen. "Seat 1A is all set," the attendant said. She slipped the boarding pass into Angela's hand. "You're in first class today, Ms. Brooks. Enjoy your flight." Angela thanked her with a bright nod and tucked the pass into her blazer pocket. As she walked back toward the waiting area, she felt a small surge of satisfaction. First class was comfortable, and over the years, she had earned enough miles to secure the best seat on the plane. She looked forward to the wide leather seat, the extra legroom, and the peaceful privacy of the front cabin. She settled into one of the cushioned chairs near the gate, resting her laptop bag on the seat beside her. The bag was slim but packed with important documents, pitch decks, financial projections, and a small stack of industry magazines. And she unzipped a side pocket and retrieved a slim notebook and pen. A few moments of quiet before boarding always helped her organize her thoughts. She jotted down a brief outline of her talking points: market growth figures, key partnerships, milestones achieved by her company. Then she paused to watch other people. A family of 4 passed by, the mother steering a stroller while the father lifted a small girl who waved excitedly at the airplanes parked on the tarmac. Nearby, a young man in a dark hoodie scrolled through his phone, earbuds in, oblivious to the rest of the world. A group of business travelers chatted in low tones about their destination, occasional laughter floating across the room. Angela smiled to herself. Airports always seemed like a strange crossroads of people on the move. Families, tourists, business people, carrying their own hopes and worries. She glanced at the gate display again. Boarding would start in 5 minutes. She zipped her notebook back into her laptop bag and swung it over her shoulder. Then she rose and joined the small line forming at the gate. The overhead speaker crackled, and a friendly voice announced that first class and priority boarding could begin. Angela straightened her jacket, smoothed her hair, and stepped forward. Mia, the attendant who had checked her in, scanned the boarding pass and waved her aboard. Angela smiled and walked down the jet bridge, her steps measured and calm. Inside the cabin, the air felt cool and quiet compared to the hustle of the terminal. The flight attendants worked efficiently, offering bottles of water or towels to new arrivals. Angela reached seat 1A, the first window seat on the left side. She placed her handbag on the empty seat beside her and slid into the plush leather. A gentle hum from the ventilation system filled the small space. She unfastened her blazer and draped it across the back of the seat. Then she reached into her bag for a noise-canceling headset and slipped it over her ears, creating a small island of calm in the softly lit cabin. From her seat, Angela could see the wide expanse of the tarmac through the oval window. A silver jet towed away from the terminal, and beyond it, maintenance vehicles trundled around other planes. The sun was bright, casting long shadows across the concrete. She tapped the window gently, watching the reflection of her own face superimposed on the scene outside. She felt a deep sense of control over her day. Everything was in order so far. The flight attendant returned to welcome her personally. "Good morning, Ms. Brooks," she said, her voice warm and professional. "Would you like a beverage before takeoff? We have orange juice, coffee, tea, or water." Angela considered for a moment. She was more focused on the board meeting than on breakfast, but a cup of coffee would help her mind stay sharp. "Coffee, please," she replied. The attendant smiled and turned to pour a fresh cup. Angela closed her eyes for a moment as the aroma reached her. She inhaled deeply, letting the rich scent settle into her chest. Then she opened her notebook. Again it reviewed her notes one last time, marking a few bullet points with confidence. A gentle tap on her shoulder made her look up. "Excuse me, Ms. Brooks," a man's voice said. Angela recognized him as her assistant, Michael, whom she had asked to join her on the trip. He held a tablet showing the latest financial spreadsheet. "I updated the projections after the investor's email last night," he said. "You want to review it now or wait until we're in the air?" Angela smiled gratefully. She lifted her headset and set it on the seat's side table. "Let's take a quick look," she said. Michael handed her the tablet and she scrolled through the numbers. Everything looked on track with the slight uptick they had hoped for. She nodded, tapped a few comments, and passed the tablet back. "That's perfect," she said. "We'll mention these figures in the second slide of the deck." Michael nodded and returned to his own seat behind her. The rest of the cabin filled up gradually. A few business people in crisp suits settled into the middle row. A couple of elderly travelers in comfortable sweaters took their seats further back. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, smiling and making small talk with passengers. Angela watched this routine unfold and felt a wave of gratitude for how smoothly it all worked. She loved travel for its reminders of how interconnected the world was, how one moment you stood in the quiet of a boardroom, and the next, you soared above mountains and rivers, heading toward new opportunities. Once the cabin door closed, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Hernandez. We're just waiting on clearance from ground control and we'll be on our way shortly." Angela felt the plane shift slightly as the engines powered up for taxi. Soft vibration through the seat signaled the start of their journey. She leaned back, took a sip of her coffee, and gazed out the window at the airport lights blinking on the runway lines. In that moment, Angela reflected on her path to this point. She grew up in a small town, the daughter of a school teacher and a nurse. She was the first in her family to attend college. She had worked late nights coding software before dawn to earn her first promotion. Now, as the CEO of a company that provided cloud-based solutions to schools and hospitals, she felt she owed her success to those early sacrifices. She thought about the students who would benefit from her company's new learning platform and the nurses, who would save time with streamlined records. Every deal she closed meant a small ripple of positive change in the world. That sense of purpose drove her forward. Even on the longest days of travel, the engines powered down slightly as they awaited their turn on the runway. Angela felt the thrill of excitement. This was the moment when she would move from preparation to action. Soon she would step off the plane in Detroit, head to a rented sedan, and join the conference room where faces were waiting for her presentation. She pictured the room full of skeptical investors leaning in as she spoke with clarity, talking them through her vision. She imagined the head of the largest venture firm nodding and offering a handshake at the end. In 5 minutes, all of this would begin in earnest. The engines roared back to life and the plane began to taxi. Angela took a final sip of her coffee, then set the cup in the holder beside her seat. She clicked her seatbelt snugly and closed her eyes for a moment, grounding herself with a few deep breaths. The plane turned onto the runway. The captain's foot pressed down on the throttle. The jet surged forward, picking up speed. Pressed her hand to the armrest and felt the force push her back. In seconds, they lifted off, and the ground fell away. The tarmac lights blurred into streaks of white and yellow. She opened her eyes as the plane climbed into the bright morning sky. Her journey had truly begun. Angela felt the gentle hum of the engines beneath her as the plane leveled off above the clouds. She relaxed into her seat, folded her notebook on her lap, and slipped her noise-canceling headset back over her ears. She planned to review her slides one more time, but first she wanted a moment of quiet. Outside the window, fluffy clouds drifted past against a pale blue sky. Inside, the cabin lights were dimmed to a soft glow, and the flight attendants moved silently down the aisle, preparing for the in-flight service. Just as Angela closed her eyes, a firm tap on her shoulder brought her attention back to the cabin. She lifted her headset and turned to see a man standing in the aisle beside her seat. His name badge read Gregory Lawson. Mid-50s, wearing a neatly pressed shirt open at the collar, and his face was set in a frown. Angela gestured politely for him to speak. "Excuse me," Gregory said, voice low but insistent. "I need you to move. This is my seat." He held out a boarding pass. Angela took it and glanced at it. The boarding pass said Seat 1A, the same seat printed on hers. "I'm sorry," Angela replied, keeping her tone calm. "But I also have Seat 1A." She showed her own pass. "We're both booked here." She paused, giving him a gentle smile. "Maybe we can ask the attendant to check again." Gregory's jaw tightened. He folded his arms across his chest and glanced over his shoulder as if looking for support. "No need," he said brusquely. "I'm positive. Look, this seat has to be mine. I paid for first class." He waved his pass again. "If you just move, we won't have a problem." Angela's heart sank at his tone. She had worked too hard, saved too many miles to lose her seat without a fight. She folded her own arms and met his gaze. "Sir, I'm also in first class. The airline assigned this seat to me. I would be happy to confirm with the crew." Gregory's eyes darted toward the front of the cabin where a flight attendant was preparing drinks. "No," he said in a low voice. "I don't want to make a fuss. Just move." He leaned in. Closer. Angela felt her personal space shrank under his demand. Angela took a steady breath. "I understand you don't want to fuss," she said softly. "But I also paid for this seat." "I'm not going anywhere." Gregory's lips curled in irritation. He put his hand out to block her way, but Angela stayed seated. She gave him a firm look. Nearby passengers quieted their conversations, sensing the tension. A business traveler, 2 rows back, paused with a magazine in his hands, watching the scene unfold. A flight attendant approached. Her name badge read Jenna. She placed a reassuring hand on Angela's arm. "Is everything all right, voice?" A voice calm and professional. Jenna glanced at both boarding passes. "Ms. Brooks, Seat 1A is yours," she said gently, pointing to Angela's pass. Then she looked at Gregory's. "Sir, this says 1B. Did you perhaps misread the letter?" She spoke kindly but clearly, making sure Gregory understood. Gregory frowned at Jenna's words. He looked down at his pass, then up at Angela. "No," he said in a harsh whisper. "This is Seat 1A. He waved his pass again. Jenna took the pass and compared it letter by letter. She frowned slightly. "Sir, if you'd like to come with me to the galley, we can sort this out," Jenna offered. Gregory glared at Angela for a moment, then stalked down the aisle after Jenna. The nearby business traveler exhaled and returned to his magazine. Angela felt a jolt of relief. She picked up her coffee cup and took a slow sip, willing her heart rate to settle. She tapped her pen against the armrest, thinking through what had just happened. Airlines sometimes overbooked or duplicated seats by mistake. That part she understood. What she did not understand was how quickly a stranger could demand her seat, refusing to verify the facts. A few minutes later, Jenna returned with Gregory, who looked embarrassed but still guarded. "Sir, your seat is actually 1B, Jenna said quietly, handing back his pass. "Please take your seat." Gregory swallowed hard, his cheeks flushing. He nodded curtly at Angela, then hurried to an aisle seat behind her. Angela watched him go, then turned to Jenna. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate your help." Jenna smiled and patted her shoulder before moving on to assist other passengers. Angela settled back into her seat, her breathing finally returning to normal. She zipped her notebook out of her bag and opened it to the page where she had listed her talking points. She tapped the edge of her pen against the paper and shook her head slightly. Even small distractions could throw her off her game. But she reminded herself that this was part of travel, the unknown, the unexpected. How she handled it would matter more than the incident itself. She closed her notebook and looked out the window at the clouds drifting beneath the wing. A flight attendant appeared again, offering a snack tray. Angela accepted a small plate of fresh fruit and a cheese square. She thanked the attendant, then took a bite of mango, letting its sweet juice refresh her. A few moments later, Michael leaned forward from his seat in 1C. "Everything okay?" he whispered. Angela nodded. Michael shook his head slightly, then returned to reviewing the deck on his tablet. Across the cabin, Gregory sat stiffly in his new seat, arms folded, and gaze fixed on the back of an airline magazine. Angela thought she caught a glimpse of him shooting her a side eye, but she turned her attention back to her notes. She knew better than to dwell on it. She had a mission to accomplish. As the snack service wrapped up, Angela unzipped her bag once more and retrieved her tablet. She powered it on and reviewed her presentation slides, swiping through each one carefully. The airline's Wi-Fi connection was too slow to stream videos, but the files she needed were already downloaded. She rehearsed her talking points under her breath. Our platform reduces administrative time by 30%. She paused, adjusting her tone. We have secured partnerships with 5 major school districts. She nodded to herself. The pacing felt right. Suddenly, a soft chime sounded from the row behind her. A flight attendant knelt beside a young woman who looked pale and was gripping the armrests tightly. The attendant offered her water and placed a cool towel on her forehead. Angela watched with concern as the woman's face regained color. The attendant spoke gently, then called another crew member over. The cabin was calm again, but Angela's heart went out to the passenger. She hoped the rest of the flight would be smooth. Angela slipped her notebook back into her bag. She had a 20-page plan typed out in it, but she knew the real magic happened in her words and her confidence. She straightened her posture and leaned back in her seat. Below, clouds stretched in an endless sea of white. Above, the sky was a brilliant blue. She felt a surge of calm determination. In less than an hour, the pilot would announce their descent into Detroit, and she would step off confidently, ready to take on the boardroom. For now, she took a moment to watch the cabin crew working together. One attendant adjusted an overhead bin, another checked on a restless toddler whose toy had fallen under the seat. People from different walks of life shared this space travelers with different stories. Different purposes, yet they were all bound by the same flight path. In that moment, Angela felt connected to something larger. She was part of this network of journeys, of hopes, moving through the sky. Her phone buzzed. She opened a text from a colleague in Detroit. Heard about the seat mix-up. Hope you're okay. See you soon. Angela typed back a quick reply. All good. See you in an hour. She slipped the phone into her pocket. The flight attendants began preparing the cart for meal service. Soft clinks of silverware and the hiss of heated meals filled the air. Angela watched as a woman in a floral scarf was offered a vegetarian option, while an elderly man in a tweed jacket chose the chicken entree. When the attendant reached Angela's row, she offered the business class menu. Angela scanned the choices: salmon with lemon herb sauce grilled, chicken with seasonal vegetables, or a plant-based lasagna. She selected the salmon and handed back the menu. A few minutes later, the attendant returned with a perfectly plated dish on fine china. Angela admired the bright pink of the salmon, the crisp green of asparagus, the golden brown of baby potatoes. She thanked the attendant and cut a small piece, savoring the tender texture and gentle flavor. As she ate, Angela thought about the meeting ahead. The investors in Detroit were cautious by nature. They asked tough questions and expected clear answers. She had prepared for every scenario: questions about cash flow, competition, technical challenges, marketing strategy. She felt ready.
More than that.
She felt grounded by the knowledge that she had faced unexpected challenges on this flight and had handled them with grace. That same poise would serve her well in the boardroom. Halfway through her meal, Angela glanced at her watch. They would begin descent soon. She closed her eyes briefly, resting her head against the seat. She pictured the glass skyscraper of the investment firm's headquarters, the polished conference room table, the faces of decision-makers leaning forward as she spoke. She imagined the moment of closing: a handshake, smiles, congratulations. The feeling of opening a door to the next stage of her growth. A gentle vibration through the cabin signaled that they were lowering altitude. The seatbelt sign illuminated, and the flight attendants moved down the aisle, collecting trays and securing carts. Angela set aside her plate and Angela sat up a little straighter when Gregory Lawson returned to his seat, still muttering under his breath. She felt a cool rush of relief that he finally accepted the correct assignment. But just as she leaned back and tried to refocus on her presentation slides, Gregory stood and shuffled back toward her. His face was red now, and his eyes flashed with anger. Angela looked up calmly. "I'm not moving," he said, his voice low and harsh. He jabbed a finger toward her. "You don't know who I am. I paid for first class. I deserve this seat more than you." Angela held his gaze without flinching. She could feel the eyes of other passengers drifting toward them again. She took a deep breath. "Sir, with respect, I also paid for this seat and earned it through miles. I'm not going anywhere." Gregory looked around as though seeking an ally in the cabin. No one moved to help him. One or two people raised their eyebrows, and a young woman a row behind whispered to her husband. The cabin felt suddenly smaller to Angela. The soft hum of the engines and the bright sky outside contrasted sharply with the tension in the aisle. Gregory's jaw tightened. He took a step closer so that his body blocked part of the aisle. Angela's assistant, Michael, who was seated directly behind her, rose and stepped forward. "Sir, please return to your seat," he said quietly but firmly. Michael was younger and not as tall as Gregory, but he spoke with a calm authority that surprised Angela. Gregory turned his scowl on Michael. "Mind your own business," he snapped. "She doesn't belong here." His hand shot out to shove Angela's handbag. From her lap, the bag bounced to the floor with a soft thud. Angela's heart pounded in her chest. But she stayed seated, her hands in her lap. She tilted her head very slightly, letting Gregory see that she would not be intimidated. Gregory's next move surprised her. He reached across and grabbed the armrest between their seats. He yanked it toward him with all his strength, as if pulling a trophy. The armrest hit Angela's side and she winced as it bumped her. Papers from her bag fluttered to the floor, her notebook, a few printed charts, and a small passport booklet. Angela felt a hot sting of anger, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, stop," she said. "You are damaging my property." Gregory glared down at her. "Your property? This is my seat." He paused, then pushed the armrest harder. Angela felt the metal press against her side. She gasped and reached out to steady herself. Michael knelt to pick up the scattered papers. "Sir, that's enough," he said. He held the charts up so Angela could grab them. Angela reached over him to collect her items. As she did, she felt Gregory's hand on her shoulder, pushing her gently but firmly. She stumbled forward and nearly fell off the seat. A sharp gasp rose from the other passengers. A woman across the aisle pressed a hand to her mouth. Angela steadied herself on the armrest and looked up at Gregory, surprised by his push. His eyes were wild. "That's it. Hush!" A voice from the front of the cabin called out. It was Jenna, the flight attendant. She moved quickly toward them, her badge clicking softly as she walked. Next to her was another attendant, a tall man whose gaze flicked between Gregory and Angela. "Sir, you must stop this behavior," Jenna said firmly. Her voice held no anger, only clear authority. "You're endangering yourself and others. You need to calm down and return to your seat." Gregory glared at Jenna, but he let go of Angela's shoulder. He straightened his shirt collar and looked as though he might argue. Instead, he took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling. The other attendant put a hand on Gregory's arm. Guiding him back to his seat, Angela sat back, clutching her papers to her chest. She rubbed her arm where the armrest had pressed against her. A light sheen of sweat covered her forehead. Passengers murmured among themselves, some offering Angela sympathetic smiles. Michael patted her arm. "Are you all right?" he asked in a low voice. Angela nodded slowly. "I'm fine. Just shaken." She cleared her throat and glanced at her tablet. The screen was dark. She tapped it on. The presentation file opened, showing the first slide. Jenna spoke again, her tones softer now. "Ma'am, would you like water or help gathering your things?" She motioned to the floor where Angela's passport and charts lay. Angela managed a small smile. "Thank you. I appreciate that." She bent to pick up each item carefully. The passport was safe and the charts were uncreased. She placed them back into her bag and zipped it closed. She took a sip of water from the plastic cup Jenna offered. As Angela straightened, she noticed a man in a suit standing behind Gregory's seat. He was a tall man with silver hair and glasses, holding a small leather briefcase in one hand. Waved slightly at Angela. Brooks, Miss Brooks? He asked quietly. I'm David Turner. I'm a lawyer. I was in coach, but I saw what happened. His voice was steady. Would you like me to stay here in case he causes more trouble? Angela's throat tightened, but she nodded. Yes, thank you. She felt gratitude well up inside her. The lawyer returned to his seat behind Gregory, placing the briefcase. On his lap, Gregory sat down, looking embarrassed now, his face pale under the cabin lights. He avoided eye contact with Angela. The attendants moved him a small bottle of water and a pack of nuts. But he swallowed them without drinking or eating. For Angela, the moment felt endless. She took another steadying breath, her heart still raced, but she focused on the sound of the engines. She checked her watch. They would land in 20 minutes. She needed to center herself before disembarking. Michael leaned forward. Do you want to run through your intro one more time? He asked. Angela shook her head gently. No, I've got it. She put her headset back on and closed her eyes for a moment. She pictured the conference room, the faces she would see, the confidence she would project. When she opened her eyes, the lawyer, Mr. Turner, caught her gaze and gave her a slight nod. She returned the nod with a small smile. It felt good to know she had allies, even strangers, who would stand up for what was right. Gregory stared fixedly out the window, as though the world outside could solve his anger. Angela leaned back, crossed her ankles in front of her, and pulled out her notebook. She wrote a single word at the top of the page, poise. Underneath, she sketched a small timeline, proof, preparation, presentation. She planned to remember this moment, the moment. She chose calm over anger, clarity over fear. This incident would not define her day or her trip. It would only be a reminder that grace under pressure could turn a tense situation into an example of resilience. The seatbelt sign flickered on. The captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, we are beginning our descent. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts. Angela clicked her belt into place and closed her notebook. She looked at Gregory one last time. He glanced at her briefly, then looked away. She felt no triumph or spite, only relief. That the confrontation was over. Outside the window, the city lights of Detroit came into view again. Angela took a deep breath, ready for the next phase of her journey. She had stood firm, protected her space, and handled a difficult person with dignity. Now she would land, walk into a room full of investors, and tell her story with the same conf. The engine's steady hum dropped away as the captain's voice came over the intercom again. Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard disturbance, we will not be departing at this time. Please remain seated while we sort the situation. Angela felt the change before she heard it, a slight shudder as the plane powered down. The soft vibration that had held her in her seat faded, and a hush fell over the cabin. Passengers exchanged puzzled glances. A mother soothed her restless toddler. A businessman closed his laptop with a soft click and looked toward the front. Angela sat still, her breathing steady. She understood the captain's choice. Safety and order mattered more than sticking to a schedule. Jenna, the flight attendant who had helped earlier, moved quickly down the aisle. Everyone, please stay. Calm and remain in your seats, she said in a firm but gentle voice. We are working with ground control and security. We will update you shortly. She offered reassuring smiles as she passed each row. Angela's heart beat a little faster. The tension still lingered in the cabin air. She cleared her throat and straightened her blazer. Michael leaned in from the seat behind her. Are you okay? He whispered. I'm fine, Angela replied, voice soft but clear. Let's just wait. She opened her notebook and began jotting a few notes about what had happened so far. Time of disturbance, names of crew members involved, and a brief description of the man who had caused the trouble. Writing helped her feel in control. From her window, she saw airport vehicles approaching the jet bridge. A security guard in a dark uniform stepped onto the plane's stairs, followed by another guard. The pair climbed into the cabin, their expressions serious but professional. One of them carried a clipboard. The other spoke quietly into a radio. Passengers sat quietly as the guards made their way down the aisle. When they reached Angela's row, they paused, asking to speak with the flight attendant. Jenna directed them toward the front, but they stopped long enough to glance at Angela. She met their eyes calmly. One offered a small nod before they continued. Angela watched as the guards reached Gregory's seat. He sat hunched over, head bowed, his hands gripping the armrests. One guard spoke to him in a low voice, then gently but firmly took hold of his arm. Gregory protested, but the guard's grip was steady. The other guard stood before him, blocking any attempt to bolt down the aisle. "Sir, you are being asked to leave the aircraft," the second guard said, voice polite, but unyielding. "Please follow us." Gregor's shoulders slumped. He looked up at Angela for a fleeting moment, eyes full of shame and frustration. Then he stood. The guard guided him past passengers, past Angela. For a moment, time slowed. Angela felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the disturbance was ending. Sadness that someone could fall so far in anger. The guards led him down the aisle, past rows of curious stares. A few passengers shook their heads in disapproval. Others whispered softly. The flight attendant collected Gregory's boarding pass as he passed and took it with a firm nod. The cabin door opened again, letting a wash of humid airport air inside. Gregory descended the stairs, flanked by security, and slipped out of sight. A murmur of quiet approval rippled through the cabin. Passengers settled back into their seats. Angela closed her notebook. She tapped her pen against her palm, thinking through the next steps. She felt Michael's hand on her shoulder. He offered a small, encouraging smile. She returned it with a nod. Moments later, Jenna approached. "Ms. Brooks, thank you for your patience and composure," she said softly. "We truly appreciate how you handled that." Angela smiled politely. "Thank you," she replied. "I just did what was right." Jenna patted her shoulder and moved on to reassure other passengers. The guard who had escorted Gregory returned alone. He met briefly with the captain in the cockpit. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Thank you for your cooperation. We are cleared to continue boarding after a short delay. We apologize for the inconvenience." A ripple of applause broke out, small but sincere. Angela allowed herself a brief smile. Jenna moved toward Angela again. "We can move you to an empty first-class seat if you'd like," she offered. Angela thought for a moment. The disturbance had shaken her slightly, and a fresh seat could help her reset. She glanced around. Seat 1C was empty, and Seat 2A had been vacated for her. "Yes, please," she said. Jenna guided her to the new seat, helping her settle in. Angela thanked her and arranged her things, handbag to the side, notebook on her lap. Tablet within reach. As she sat, she heard a soft cough behind her. She turned to see Mr. Turner, the lawyer who had offered his help earlier, standing. "Would you like me to stay close by?" he asked. Angela appreciated his quiet offer. "Thank you. That would mean a lot," she said. He nodded and took the aisle seat next to her new spot. Michael settled next to her as well. And together they began to review the presentation one more time. But before they dove in, a representative from the airline boarded, carried a small notepad, and introduced himself as Mr. Patel. He spoke in a calm, respectful tone. "Ms. Brooks, I'm deeply sorry for the disruption. I'd like to take a brief statement about what occurred so we can address the situation fully. Would that be all right?" Angela nodded. She flipped her notebook open to a blank page. Mr. Patel donned a face mask and held out a small recorder. "When you're ready, could you describe what happened from the beginning?" Angela took a breath, gathered her thoughts, and began calmly. She detailed Gregory's first claim on her seat, the two attendants' involvement, his aggressive behavior, and how security removed him. Mr. Patel jotted notes, occasionally thanking her for clarifying details. As she spoke, she felt a sense of purpose. Her words helped turn a chaotic moment into an official record. When she finished, Mr. Patel looked up. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks. We will follow up with you by email if we need more information. The airline will also compensate you for the delay and any inconvenience." Angela closed her notebook. "Thank you," she said. "I appreciate that." Mr. Patel departed down the aisle, leaving a calm hush in his wake. The flight attendants resumed their duties, offering drinks and snacks to first-class passengers. Angela accepted a glass of sparkling water. She took a slow sip, feeling the cool bubbles soothe her throat. Michael opened his tablet again, ready for their pre-meeting review. Through her window, Angela watched ground crew prepare the engines for departure. Baggage trucks trundled nearby, and boarding ramps moved away. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the tarmac in warm gold. Angela felt the earlier tension fade. She leaned back, closed her eyes for a moment, and pictured her investors waiting for her arrival. A soft chime from the cockpit signaled readiness. The captain announced, "We will be pushing back shortly. Thank you again for your patience." Engines rumbled to life once more. Angela felt the familiar vibration through the seat. She straightened her notebook on her lap. Michael whispered, "Ready?" She gave him a determined nod. As the plane taxied toward the runway, Angela reflected on what had transpired. A stranger's anger had threatened to derail her journey. Yet through calm resolve, respectful insistence, and the support of others, order had been restored. She felt gratitude for the crew and for strangers who had stood by her. She thought of the lessons she would share with her team back home in the face of unexpected challenges. Poise and clarity could turn adversity into strength. The plane turned onto the runway and accelerated. Angela pressed her hand to the armrest, this time at ease. Seconds later, they lifted off again, climbing into the sky. She opened her notebook and wrote a single line: "Grace under pressure earns respect." She closed the book, opened her tablet, and began mentally rehearsing her opening lines. The disturbance was over, and the real journey continued, one of promise, leadership, and the unwavering belief that she belonged exactly where she was. A plane landed in Detroit as the sun lowered gently into the horizon, casting a soft orange glow across the runway. Angela looked out the window and watched the airport buildings grow larger as the aircraft rolled toward the gate. Everything felt calm now. The engines hummed softly, and the passengers around her began to gather their belongings. People spoke in low voices, putting away laptops, folding newspapers, and stretching after the long delay. Angela sat still for a moment, longer, her hands resting on her notebook. She wasn't in a hurry. She took a deep breath, letting the cool cabin air settle her nerves one final time. This wasn't just the end of a flight. It felt like the end of a moment that had tested her patience, her dignity, and her strength. As the seatbelt sign dinged off, Michael turned to her with a reassuring smile. "You handled that like a true leader," he said quietly. Angela smiled back. "Thank you. I just did what needed to be done." She reached for her bag and zipped it up carefully. Her documents were all in place, her tablet fully charged. She was ready for the meeting ahead, not just with facts and slides, but with a quiet confidence that had been strengthened during the flight. They stepped off the plane into the cool jet bridge. A soft breeze brushed against Angela's face. As she walked down toward the terminal, she didn't feel angry anymore. Instead, she felt grateful for the flight crew, for Mr. Turner, the lawyer, for the calm support of Michael, and for her own choice to remain steady through a storm. A representative from the airline was waiting at the gate exit. "Ms. Brooks," he asked politely, "we'd like to offer our sincere apologies again for the situation. A report has been filed and further action will be taken. If there's anything you need, please don't hesitate to contact us." Angela nodded. "Thank you. I appreciate you taking it seriously." The representative handed her a formal apology letter and a voucher for future travel. Outside the terminal, their car was waiting. A professional driver held a tablet with Angela's name written across the screen. He opened the car door and welcomed her with a polite nod. Angela and Michael slid into the back seat, and the door closed with a quiet click. The city lights flickered outside as they made their way to the hotel. Angela glanced out the window at the streets of Detroit, familiar, yet always new. People walked along the sidewalks, some heading home from work, others talking and laughing with friends. Stores were closing for the night, their lights dimming one by one. The driver's voice came through softly. "You'll be at the hotel." "In 10 minutes, ma'am? Is the temperature comfortable?" "It's perfect, thank you," Angela replied. Michael opened his tablet and scrolled through the final version of the presentation. "We're all set," he said. "Slides, backup copies, and digital links. You're going to do great." Angela smiled. "I know I will." But more than the presentation, it was the moment on the plane that stuck in her mind. She had been challenged, not just by someone trying to take her seat, but by an attitude that suggested she didn't belong. That was something she had faced many times before, even as she rose higher in her career. But this time, she hadn't let it slide past. She had stood her ground calmly, with respect and with truth, and everyone saw it. The car pulled into the hotel driveway, where a porter greeted them and took their bags. Inside, the lobby was quiet and elegant, with warm lighting and the soft sound of a piano playing somewhere in the background. Angela checked in at the front desk while Michael confirmed their conference room location for the next morning. In her room, she laid out her clothes for the meeting: a dark navy suit, soft white blouse, and a pair of low-heeled shoes. She took a shower, letting the warm water wash away the last bit of tension. Then she sat by the window, sipping herbal tea and reading through her notes one final time. That night she slept deeply and peacefully. The next morning, sunlight filled the room as Angela stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her blazer. Her hair was neat, her shoes polished, and her smile strong. She walked with calm determination toward the meeting hall, where the investors were already gathering. Inside the room, long windows filled the space with natural light. The table was sleek and modern, surrounded by leather chairs, Angela greeted, each person with a warm smile and a firm handshake. She took her place at the head of the table and opened her laptop. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and steady. "My name is Angela Brooks, and I'm honored to share with you today how our platform is transforming the way schools and hospitals manage their information." She moved through her slides with ease, explaining growth numbers, partnerships, and future plans. The room stayed engaged. Heads nodded. Pens moved. Questions were asked, sharp ones, but Angela welcomed them with clarity and grace. Near the end, she paused. "I'd like to share something that happened to me yesterday," she said. The room grew quiet. She told them briefly, but honestly, about the flight, about the man who tried to take her seat, and how the situation unfolded. "I share this not for sympathy," she said gently, "but to show that leadership is not always about big decisions. Sometimes it's about small moments. It's about staying grounded when others try to shake you. It's about protecting your place not through loud words, but through calm truth." There was silence for a few seconds after she finished. Then one of the lead investors, a gray-haired man in a charcoal suit, leaned forward. "That," he said, "is exactly the kind of person we want to invest in." The meeting closed with applause. Angela stood tall, shook hands again, and walked out of the room knowing that she had not only secured funding, but also earned lasting respect. Later that evening, Angela and Michael sat in a small restaurant near the hotel. The lights were soft, and quiet jazz played in the background. The waiter brought their food-grilled salmon and a fresh salad for Angela, a warm chicken dish for Michael. "To strength and dignity," Michael said, raising his glass of sparkling water. Angela lifted hers. "To grace under pressure," she said with a smile. They clinked glasses and ate peacefully, knowing the hard part was behind them. That night, as Angela packed her bag for the return flight, she placed her notebook on top. Before closing the zipper, she flipped it open and wrote one last line: "Never let anyone decide where you belong. You already know." She closed the notebook, zipped the bag, and turned off the lights, ready to face tomorrow with the same strength that had carried her through the sky.